November 29, 1944. 400 feet beneath the churning waves of the Pacific Ocean, Commander Joseph Francis Enright clutches the steel railing of the USS Archerfish's periscope, his knuckles white with tension. The harsh red battle lighting casts shadows across the faces of the 80 men crowded into the submarine's control room. No one speaks, no one breathes. The only sound is the pinging of sonar, and the faint, distant rumbling of depth charges exploding in the water above. "Deeper," Enright orders, his voice calm despite the maelstrom raging inside him. "Take her down to 400 feet. The hull of the submarine creaks in protest as it descends into the darkness. The pressure gauge needle climbs steadily upward. 400 feet is dangerously close to crush depth, the point at which the immense pressure of the ocean would implode the vessel like an aluminum can. But right now, the crushing depths seem safer than what waits above. 3 Japanese destroyers dropping depth charges, hunting for the submarine that just launched 6 torpedoes at their prized aircraft carrier. Enright lowers his eyes from the periscope and glances at his wristwatch. 0322 hours. Just 7 minutes earlier, he had given the order that would change the course of naval warfare in the Pacific. "Fire all 6 forward tubes." The words had barely left his mouth when the submarine shuddered as 6 Mark 18 torpedoes surged from their tubes toward the massive silhouette of what Enright believed was simply a large Japanese carrier. What he didn't know, what no American knew, was that his target was the 72,000-ton Shinano, Japan's secret supercarrier, the largest warship ever built, on its maiden voyage from Tokyo Bay. The vessel so valuable to the Japanese war effort that its very existence had been kept secret from American intelligence. A vessel that, according to all rational calculation, should have been impervious to a submarine attack. Yet in the darkness of that November night, one man's decision to disobey conventional torpedo tactics, to aim higher on the hull rather than at the waterline, would send this Leviathan to the bottom of the Pacific, and in doing so, write his name in the annals of naval warfare forever. No one aboard the USS Archerfish that night could have predicted the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. As the depth charges continued to explode around them, Joseph Enright had no way of knowing that he had just orchestrated the most significant submarine kill of World War II, sinking the largest warship ever taken down by an undersea vessel in the history of naval combat. This is the story of how an American submarine commander, previously removed from command for failing to attack another carrier, redeemed himself by sinking Japan's greatest naval secret before it could even join the war. A tale of redemption, ingenuity, and how one split-second decision changed the course of the Pacific War. Joseph Francis Enright was not born into a family with a proud naval tradition. He entered the world on September 13, 1910 in Minot, North Dakota, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. His childhood was marked by the quiet determination and resilient spirit typical of America's heartland, where hard work was not merely a virtue, but a necessity for survival. The young Enright possessed a sharp mind that distinguished him from his peers. His academic prowess eventually earned him an appointment to the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland, a prestigious institution that transformed farm boys and city kids alike into the nation's naval officers. He graduated in 1933, during the depths of the Great Depression, when many Americans struggled to find work and put food on the table. After graduation, Ensign Enright was assigned to the battleship USS Maryland, where he spent 3 years learning the fundamentals of naval warfare. The massive dreadnought, with its 16-inch guns and armor plate measured in feet rather than inches, represented the peak of naval power projection. Yet even as Enright mastered the operation of this floating fortress, a new type of warfare was calling to him, one conducted not on the ocean's surface but beneath it. In 1936, Enright volunteered for submarine service, entering a dangerous and claustrophobic world that demanded a special breed of sailor. The submarine force was then considered the black sheep of the Navy, undermanned, under-equipped, and underappreciated. But Enright recognized that beneath the waves lay the future of naval combat, especially in the vast expanses of the Pacific, where Japan's rising imperial ambitions were increasingly concerning American strategists. Submarine training tested every aspect of an officer's capabilities. The physical demands were immense. men had to function in cramped quarters, where fresh air was a luxury and personal space non-existent. The mental requirements were even more stringent. Officers needed to calculate complex navigation problems in their heads, make split-second decisions with limited information, and maintain absolute composure under circumstances that would break most men. Enright excelled in this environment. His calm demeanor and methodical approach to problem-solving made him well-suited for command beneath the waves. By the time the United States entered World War II, following the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Lieutenant Commander Enright had already established himself as a capable submarine officer. The early days of the war were dark times for the American Navy. The devastating attack on Pearl Harbor had crippled the Pacific Fleet's battleships, leaving submarines as one of the few offensive weapons America could deploy against Japan. As Japanese forces swept through the Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, American submarines slipped into enemy-controlled waters to strike at Japan's vital maritime supply lines. Enright's first wartime command was the USS O-10, an obsolete submarine used primarily for training. Though he yearned for combat, Enright recognized the value of his role in preparing the next generation of submariners for the deadly game unfolding across the Pacific. His patience and dedication were rewarded in 1943 when he received command of a new modern fleet submarine, the USS Dace. The opportunity Enright had waited for had arrived, but his first combat patrol aboard Dace would test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was during this patrol that Enright encountered his first major target, the Japanese aircraft carrier Shokaku, a veteran of the Pearl Harbor attack. With the carrier in his periscope crosshairs, Enright hesitated. He chose to make a textbook, time-consuming approach rather than risk a hasty attack. That decision proved costly. The carrier changed course and escaped without Enright firing a single torpedo. Upon returning to Midway, the weight of his failure pressed heavily upon him. In an act that displayed both his integrity and the burden of command, Enright did something remarkable. He requested to be relieved of command. "I was responsible for an unproductive patrol," he wrote in his report, "and request to be relieved by an officer who can perform more satisfactorily." Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of submarine forces in the Pacific, granted the request. Enright was reassigned to administrative duties at the submarine base on Midway Island. For many officers, such a reassignment would have meant the end of their combat career. For Enright, it seemed his chance at redemption had slipped away, just as the Shokaku had slipped through his periscope crosshairs. What Enright couldn't have known was that fate would give him a second chance, a rare opportunity in wartime, when mistakes often carried permanent consequences. The circuitous path that would lead him back to command began, ironically, at a poker table. During his shore duty at Midway, Enright's skill at cards caught the attention of a particular captain who had lost a substantial sum to him. The captain, impressed by Enright's nerves of steel during high-stakes poker games, reasoned that a man who could remain so cool under pressure at the card table might still make an excellent combat commander. This chance observation would prove pivotal in Enright's career trajectory. After 6 months of administrative duty, Enright requested another chance at submarine command. His reputation as a skilled officer, despite his previous failure, combined with the Navy's constant need for experienced submarine commanders, led to his assignment to the USS Archerfish in September 1944. Named after a tropical fish known for its ability to shoot down prey with jets of water, the Archerfish was a Barlow-class submarine, the most advanced in the American fleet. As Enright took command of his new vessel, the war in the Pacific had entered a new phase. American forces were on the offensive, island-hopping across the Pacific toward Japan. The once mighty Japanese Navy, severely weakened after devastating losses at Midway, the Philippine Sea, and Leyte Gulf, was increasingly on the defensive. Yet Japan still possessed formidable naval assets and the will to fight to the bitter end. Enright knew this patrol aboard Archerfish represented more than just another mission. It was his opportunity for redemption. As the submarine departed Pearl Harbor on October 30th, 1944, bound for the waters near Japan, he carried with him the painful lessons of his previous failure and a determination not to repeat them. What he didn't know was that he was sailing toward an encounter that would permanently inscribe his name in naval history books. The crew of Archerfish felt the weight of expectation as they embarked on their 5th war patrol. Their previous 4 patrols had yielded no confirmed sinkings, earning them the unflattering nickname Archerfish Maru from their fellow submariners, the honorific Maru typically reserved for Japanese merchant vessels, implying they were more helpful to the enemy than to their own side. The 81 men aboard represented a cross-section of America. Farm boys from Kansas and Ohio worked alongside the sons of coal miners from Pennsylvania and West Virginia, street-smart kids from New York and Chicago, and fishermen from coastal towns. They came from different backgrounds but shared a common purpose: to bring the war to Japan's doorstep. Archerfish's patrol began routinely enough. After departing Pearl Harbor, the submarine stopped briefly at Saipan for minor repairs, before continuing toward the Japanese home islands. Their primary mission was to serve as lifeguards for B-29 Superfortress bomber crews who might ditch in the ocean during raids on Tokyo. It was unglamorous, but essential work, searching for downed aviators in enemy waters, a mission of mercy amid the brutality of war. On November 28, 1944, Archerfish received word that no air raids were scheduled for that day, giving them freedom to patrol as they saw fit. Commander Enright decided to position his boat near the entrance to Tokyo Bay, hoping to intercept Japanese shipping in this high-traffic area. As darkness fell, Archerfish's radar operator detected a large contact emerging from Tokyo Bay, approximately 12 miles distant. Enright initially believed it to be an oil tanker, a valuable target, but not an extraordinary one. However, as Archerfish closed the distance, the radar signature revealed something much larger, escorted by 3 destroyers and a submarine chaser. Enright ordered his submarine to shadow the formation from a safe distance. Through the submarine's periscope, he could make out the silhouette of what appeared to be an aircraft carrier, a prime target for any submarine commander. What Enright couldn't know was that he was observing the Shinano, a vessel whose very existence was one of Japan's most closely guarded military secrets. The Shinano had begun its life 3 years earlier as the 3rd hull of the Yamato-class battleships, the largest and most powerful battleships ever constructed. With armor plate 18 inches thick and 9 18-inch guns, these behemoths represented the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering. But after Japan's devastating carrier losses at the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy made a fateful decision. The partially completed battleship would be converted into an aircraft carrier. For 2 years, Japanese workers labored in secrecy to transform the warship. To prevent American reconnaissance aircraft from discovering the project, they built a massive roof over the dry dock. Workers were housed on site to prevent information leaks. The result was a 72,000-ton supercarrier, nearly 50% larger than any American carrier of the time. On November 19, 1944, Shinano was formally commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy, despite being only 80% complete. 10 days later, she departed Yokosuka Naval Arsenal bound for Kure Naval Base, where she would receive her full complement of aircraft and complete her fitting out. The Japanese High Command was so concerned about American submarine activity that they ordered the transfer to occur at night, believing the darkness would shield their precious vessel from prying periscopes. Captain Toshio Abe, Shinano's commanding officer, protested the timing of the transfer. He argued that his crew, largely composed of inexperienced sailors, needed daylight to properly train, and that the ship's watertight integrity had not been fully tested. His concerns were overruled. The need to get Shinano to the safety of Kure, where American air attacks were less frequent, took priority. What neither Abe nor his superiors could have anticipated was that their secret supercarrier, on its maiden voyage, would cross paths with an American submarine commanded by an officer with something to prove. The Battle of the Pacific was not merely a clash of ships and planes, it was a war of information. Intelligence on enemy movements, capabilities, and intentions often proved as valuable as firepower. In this arena, both Japan and America scored victories and suffered defeats. The Japanese success in concealing Shinano's construction represented a significant intelligence victory. American naval planners had no knowledge of this massive carrier's existence. The Japanese had converted their devastating losses at Midway into a valuable lesson. Never again would so much of their carrier strength be risked in a single battle. Shinano was designed not as a conventional fleet carrier, but as a support carrier, intended to resupply other carriers with aircraft, munitions, and fuel, remaining safely behind the main battle line. Her massive size allowed her to carry spare aircraft, parts, and ammunition that could replace combat losses suffered by the frontline carriers. In addition to her support role, Shinano carried specialized armament that reflected Japan's increasingly desperate strategic situation. Among her deadly cargo were 50 Oka rocket-powered kamikaze aircraft, essentially manned missiles designed to crash into American warships. These weapons of self-sacrifice represented Japan's hope that sheer determination could overcome America's growing material advantage. As 1944 drew to a close, the strategic situation in the Pacific had become increasingly dire for Japan. American forces had liberated the Philippines, placing them within striking distance of the Japanese home islands. B-29 Superfortress bombers, operating from bases in the Mariana Islands, were beginning to rain destruction on Japanese cities. Most critically, American submarines were strangling Japan's maritime lifelines, sinking merchant vessels faster than they could be replaced. Against this backdrop, Shinano represented a glimmer of hope for the Imperial Japanese Navy, a powerful new weapon that might yet turn the tide of war. If she could reach Kure safely, complete her fitting out and join the fleet, she might yet make a difference in the desperate struggle. Captain Abe understood this as he guided his massive vessel through the waters south of Tokyo Bay on that fateful November night. What he didn't realize was that an American submarine commander was watching his every move, calculating distance, speed, and angle of approach, preparing for an attack that would deny Japan its new supercarrier before it could even enter the war. For 6 hours, Archerfish shadowed the Japanese task force, maintaining a parallel course at a safe distance. Commander Enright faced a difficult tactical situation. The carrier was moving at 18 knots, faster than his submarine could maintain while submerged. To keep pace, Archerfish would need to remain on the surface, risking detection by the escort vessels or the carrier's lookouts. Yet Enright persisted, maintaining contact with the target throughout the night. His experience told him that sooner or later, the carrier would present an opportunity for attack. Japanese naval doctrine called for zigzagging, regular course changes designed to complicate submarine targeting. While effective in theory, this practice sometimes inadvertently turned vessels into the path of the very submarines they were trying to evade. Aboard Shinano, Captain Abe believed his greatest threat came from a coordinated wolf pack attack, multiple American submarines working together to overwhelm his escort screen. When Shinano's lookout spotted Archerfish on the surface at 22:45 hours, Abe ordered his formation to turn away, believing the submarine was merely acting as a decoy to draw off his escorts, while other submarines moved into attack position. This misreading of the situation proved fatal. There was no wolf pack, only Archerfish, hunting alone in the night. Furthermore, mechanical problems had forced Shinano to reduce speed to 18 knots, exactly matching Archerfish's maximum surface speed. What should have been a straightforward transit from Yokosuka to Kure had become a deadly game of cat and mouse. At 02:56 hours on November 29th, Shinano turned southwest, inadvertently placing herself directly in Archerfish's path. Enright recognized the opportunity immediately. He ordered Archerfish to submerge and prepare for attack. The submarine slipped beneath the waves, its electric motors propelling it silently toward an intercept position. Through his periscope, Enright watched as the massive carrier grew larger in the lens. Years of training, months of preparation, and the bitter lessons of his previous failure all converged in this moment. As the range closed to 1,400 yards, just under a mile, Enright faced a critical decision. Conventional submarine doctrine called for torpedoes to be set for a depth that would strike the target at its waterline, where the hull was most vulnerable. But something told Enright this target was different. Its sheer size suggested it might have enhanced underwater protection. Torpedo bulges or multiple compartments that could absorb damage at the waterline. In a split-second decision that would prove decisive, Enright ordered his torpedoes set to run at just 10 feet depth, higher than normal. His instinct told him that punching holes higher in the hull might cause more significant flooding and increase the chances of capsizing the vessel. It was a calculated risk, a deviation from standard procedure based on intuition and experience rather than doctrine. At 0317 hours, with the carrier presenting her full broadside to Archerfish, Enright gave the order, "Fire all 6 forward tubes." The submarine shuddered as 6 Mark 18 torpedoes surged from their tubes toward the unsuspecting carrier. Then began the longest wait in submarine warfare, the agonizing seconds between torpedo launch and impact. The first torpedo struck Shinano near her stern approximately 50 seconds after launch. A massive fireball erupted from the carrier's hull. "Got 'em!" Enright exclaimed, his eyes still fixed to the periscope. 8 seconds later, a second explosion ripped through the carrier's hull. 4 more explosions followed in rapid succession as the remaining torpedoes found their mark. 4 of the 6 torpedoes had struck home, an extraordinary accuracy rate in submarine warfare. But Enright had no time to celebrate. The Japanese escort vessels immediately turned toward the location of the torpedo tracks, intent on destroying the submarine that had dared to attack their charge. "Take her deep," Enright ordered. 400 feet. The submarine tilted downward, diving beneath the reach of the Japanese destroyer's sonar. For the next hour, Archerfish evaded 14 depth charges dropped by the escort vessels. Inside the submarine, men held their breath as each explosion shook their steel cocoon, but Archerfish's evasion tactics proved effective. The Japanese destroyers, focused on protecting their stricken carrier, eventually broke off their attack. What Enright couldn't see from 400 feet below was the unfolding disaster aboard Shinano. His decision to set the torpedoes to run shallow had proven devastatingly effective. Rather than striking at the waterline where the carrier's anti-torpedo bulges might have absorbed some of the blast, the torpedoes had hit higher on the hull, where the armor belt joined the anti-torpedo bulge, a structural weakness in the design. The explosions had not only torn huge holes in the hull, but had dislodged an I-beam in one of the boiler rooms, which in turn had punched through into an adjacent compartment. Water poured into the carrier at an alarming rate. Compounding the crisis, many of Shinano's watertight doors had not yet been installed. The ship had left port before construction was fully complete. Initially, Captain Abe remained confident in his ship's survivability. Shinano was, after all, based on a battleship design with extensive compartmentalization. He ordered damage control parties to contain the flooding while maintaining a speed of 18 knots toward the Japanese coast. If they could reach shallow water, they might be able to beach the carrier and save both ship and crew. But the damage was far more severe than Abe initially realized. The inexperienced crew, many of whom had never been to sea before, struggled with damage control procedures. By 0600 hours, less than 3 hours after the torpedo strikes, Shinano had lost all power. Water continued to pour in faster than pumps could remove it. The massive vessel began to list heavily to starboard. By 1000 hours, the list had increased to 15 degrees. Captain Abe finally gave the order to abandon ship. At 10:57 hours, just 7 hours and 40 minutes after Archerfish's attack, Shinano capsized and sank, taking Captain Abe and 1,435 of her crew to the bottom of the Pacific. Only 570 men were rescued by the escort vessels, a ship designed to displace 72,000 tons, built to the highest standards of Japanese naval engineering and expected to help turn the tide of the war, had been sunk on her maiden voyage by 6 torpedoes from a single American submarine. Back aboard Archerfish, Commander Enright had no way of knowing the magnitude of what he had just accomplished. As his submarine cautiously rose to periscope depth several hours later, he observed only oil slicks and floating debris. The carrier was gone, but Enright could only estimate the size and type of vessel he had sunk. Based on what he had observed through his periscope, he believed it to be a large fleet carrier, perhaps of the Hayataka class, displacing approximately 28,000 tons. When Archerfish arrived at Guam on December 15th after 48 days on patrol, Enright reported his successful attack. To his surprise, the Office of Naval Intelligence initially refused to credit him with sinking a carrier. "Navy intelligence won't support your claim," he was told. "They're saying there wasn't any carrier in Tokyo Bay. Will you settle for a cruiser?" Enright and his crew were incredulous. They knew what they had seen and what they had hit. Fortunately, Enright had made detailed sketches of the target as viewed through his periscope. These drawings, attached to his patrol report, eventually convinced naval intelligence to credit Archerfish with sinking a 28,000-ton carrier. It wasn't until after the war, when American occupation forces gained access to Japanese naval records, that the full truth emerged. Archerfish had not sunk a 28,000-ton carrier. She had sunk the 72,000-ton Shinano, the largest warship ever sent to the bottom by a submarine. The vessel had been so secret that American intelligence hadn't even known it existed. For his extraordinary achievement, Commander Enright was awarded the Navy Cross, and Archerfish received the Presidential Unit Citation. The citation praised Enright's persistence and courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and noted that he had contributed materially to the success of his vessel in sinking the 72,000-ton Japanese carrier. The sinking of Shinano represented more than just the loss of a valuable warship for Japan. It symbolized the increasingly hopeless nature of their naval war. Even their most secret projects, their largest warships, could not escape the reach of American submarines. The carrier, built at enormous expense of resources and manpower, had been sunk before firing a shot in anger, before launching a single aircraft in combat. For Joseph Enright, the sinking of Shinano provided both personal redemption and professional validation. The officer who had once requested relief from command after failing to attack a carrier had now sunk the largest carrier ever built. His willingness to trust his instincts, setting torpedoes to run at an unconventional depth, had proven decisive. In the pressure cooker environment of submarine warfare, where split-second decisions often meant the difference between success and failure, life and death, Enright had made the right call when it mattered most. Archerfish continued her war patrols under Enright's command until the Japanese surrender in August 1945. On September 2, 1945, Enright and his crew had the honor of being among the 12 submarine commanders invited to witness the formal Japanese surrender ceremony aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. As Enright stood on Archerfish's bridge, watching the proceedings through binoculars, he must have reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. From the disappointment of his failed attack on Shokaku to the triumph of sinking Shinano, his wartime experience embodied both the harsh realities and the redemptive possibilities of command at sea. The strategic impact of Shinano's sinking extended beyond the loss of a single carrier, significant though that was. Japan had invested enormous resources in the construction of this massive vessel at a time when those resources, steel, fuel, skilled labor, were increasingly scarce. The carrier represented one of Japan's last hopes of projecting naval power in the face of overwhelming American material superiority. With Shinano's loss, Japan's ability to contest control of the seas around their home islands diminished further. American submarines, aircraft carriers, and battleships operated with increasing impunity as the war drew to its inevitable conclusion. The sinking demonstrated that no matter how large or well-armored a surface vessel might be, it remained vulnerable to the silent threat of submarines lurking beneath the waves. For the submarine service as a whole, Archerfish's success highlighted the decisive role these vessels had played in the Pacific War. American submarines, comprising less than 2% of the U.S. Navy's personnel, had sunk over 30% of all Japanese warships destroyed during the conflict and more than 5 million tons of merchant shipping. They had effectively severed Japan's maritime lifelines, preventing raw materials from reaching Japanese factories and finished goods from reaching their military forces. The technological and tactical lessons of the Shinano sinking influenced post-war submarine development in both the United States and the Soviet Union. The effectiveness of Enright's higher-than-normal torpedo settings against a heavily armored target led to refinements in torpedo attack procedures. More broadly, the sinking reinforced the growing realization that the age of the battleship had passed, and that aircraft carriers, despite their power, remained vulnerable to submarine attack. After the war, Joseph Enright continued his naval career, eventually rising to the rank of captain. He commanded Submarine Division 31 and later Submarine Squadron 8 before retiring from active duty in 1963. Following his naval service, he worked for the Northrop Corporation, helping design navigational systems for submarines, applying the practical experience gained during his wartime service to advance the technology of undersea warfare. In 1987, Enright co-authored a book titled Shinano: The Sinking of Japan's Secret Supership, providing a detailed account of the historic encounter. The book offered insights not only into the tactical aspects of the attack, but also into the psychological dimensions of command, the burden of responsibility, the necessity of decisive action, and the redemptive power of perseverance. Joseph Francis Enright passed away on July 20, 2000, at his home in Fairfax, Virginia, at the age of 89. He was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, his gravestone bearing silent testimony to his service and his singular achievement. Yet perhaps the most fitting monument to Enright's accomplishment lies not in Arlington Cemetery, but in the annals of naval history, where the sinking of Shinano remains the largest warship ever sent to the bottom by a submarine, a record unlikely to be broken in an age where aircraft carriers are escorted by increasingly sophisticated anti-submarine defenses. The story of Joseph Enright and the sinking of Shinano embodies many of the qualities that defined America's approach to warfare in the Pacific: innovation, persistence, and the courage to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. In the chaos of combat, with limited information and little time for deliberation, Enright trusted his training, experience, and instincts. His story reminds us that behind the grand strategies and massive industrial mobilization that characterized World War II, individual decisions made by commanders at the tactical level often proved decisive. As the submarine war in the Pacific recedes into history, overtaken by newer conflicts and more advanced weapon systems, the accomplishment of Archerfish and her crew stands as a testament to what can be achieved when preparation meets opportunity, when technical proficiency combines with tactical innovation, and when a commander facing overwhelming odds refuses to back down. Would you have made the same call as Enright? Would you have trusted your instincts enough to deviate from standard torpedo settings? Would you have persisted in tracking a target for 6 hours, knowing that the odds of a successful attack were slim and the consequences of failure potentially fatal? These are questions that each of us must answer for ourselves. But they remind us that courage comes in many forms, sometimes in the quiet determination to pursue a difficult objective against long odds, rather than in dramatic acts of physical bravery. The sinking of Shinano changed the course of naval warfare, not through the introduction of revolutionary technology or tactics, but through the simple application of existing capabilities with extraordinary skill and determination. It demonstrated that even the mightiest warships remain vulnerable to the determined actions of smaller vessels commanded by individuals willing to accept great risk in pursuit of outsized results. As we reflect on this remarkable episode from World War II, we might consider how often the course of history has been altered, not by grand forces beyond human control, but by the decisions of individuals willing to seize the initiative at critical moments. Joseph Enright's redemption came through such a moment, a split-second decision to alter torpedo depths based on nothing more than instinct and experience. In an age of increasing automation and computerized decision-making, the story of Archerfish and Shinano reminds us of the enduring importance of human judgment, courage, and leadership in determining the outcome of conflicts. No algorithm could have made the intuitive leap that led Enright to adjust his torpedo settings. No computer could have weighed the complex factors involved in pursuing a target for 6 hours through enemy-controlled waters. The legacy of Commander Joseph Enright and the crew of USS Archerfish lives on not only in naval history books, but in the tradition of American submarine service, a tradition that continues to emphasize initiative, technical excellence, and the courage to make difficult decisions when lives and missions hang in the balance. Comment below and share this story so others can remember what one man's courage and determination accomplished on that dark Pacific night in November 1944, how one submarine commander sank Japan's largest carrier and vanished before they could strike back.